I just went to a meeting where the CEO of Auckland Council, Stephen Town, stood up and went, Auckland Council now has a policy of creating congestion. Well, this was at a meeting of chartered accountants and associated industry people who all went, what is he talking about? And he just blatantly said, we are unashamedly going to build cycleways across Auckland, creating bus lanes, and you will be forced to use public transport.
Hi, this is Bruce Lipton, and you're listening to Planet FM.
Kia ora, greetings, and welcome to Planet FM 104.6. I'm Tim Lynch, and I trust that you are doing well. I invite you to stay with me over the next hour as we discuss and find ways to take care of our unique and magnificent green planet Earth.
Kia ora and welcome. Today I'm talking with Lisa Prager, who is an artist, sculptor, award-winning documentary maker and proud co-owner of Garnet Station Cafe Bistro in Westmere. She trained as an actor in the late 70s at Theatre Corporate in Auckland, but left to become a political activist and pop artist. Involved with Wake Up Auckland in the early 2000s, she challenged Les Mills and Auckland Council's homophobic attitude towards the hero parade and homosexuality. She stood with others against John Banks and the sale of pensioner affordable housing and the actions of Auckland Council and Auckland Transport to transfer public assets into private hands. She stood with others to fight the sale of Airport Share, the privatisation of West Haven Marina, and the ideology behind the badly designed, unsafe, overpriced cycleways. Lisa supports a nationwide tree protection policy and replanting native bush, not pines, to fight climate change. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Good to have you in the studio.
Thanks very much for having me.
Now, Lisa, you've had lots of adventures in your life, and one of them was to get arrested last year. Would you like to tell us about that and how it relates to our topic of Auckland Transport?
Yes, well, I was arrested for removing the bluestones that Auckland Transport contractors had built out into the middle of Surrey Crescent. Right at the intersection of Richmond Road and Surrey Crescent. And for months, the entire community had been asking Auckland Transport to have their contractors remove this dangerous obstacle in the middle of the road that was causing a kind of a pinch point where buses couldn't turn out and cars were swerving, and it was incredibly dangerous. And we just had a meeting with Auckland Transport as the community liaison group, and again asked them to remove it. They agreed to, but then just sat on their hands for, 9 days, and finally I just had enough. So I decided to take direct action. I got a sledgehammer and a crowbar and went up there and removed them. And I can honestly tell you, I don't know how I did it. At one point I said, Gaia, if you really care, you'll help me. And suddenly these rocks started to just melt. And a member of the public, I presume someone from the bike lobby, rang the police, who turned up in the rainbow police car and duly arrested me. Now, the irony of this is that within 3 days, Auckland Transport removed that dangerous public obstacle, sealing over it, making it as if it had never happened. And for my sins, I had to do a first aid course with St. John's, which I'm very grateful for, because I learned a lot about how to cope with people in dire circumstances. So it's an ironic situation where Auckland Transport knew they were creating congestion, refused to remove it until I took direct action.
Okay, and to put that in a bigger context, you've been protesting about the cycleways as a person with a business, and so this was all part of the cycleway project?
Well, yes. What happened was I got a letter through the mail, and a Auckland Transport consultant, Aaron Hutchins, turned up in my cafe Garnet Station on Garnet Road next to the school and went, guess what? We're going to remove all the parking on Garnet Road, but we're going to leave you and the dairy one car park. How's that? And And I just looked at him and went, are you totally insane? And so from that moment on, I began to get interested in what was Auckland Transport really up to. Well, one of my friends and associates rocked up and went, hey, I just went to a meeting where the CEO of Auckland Council, Stephen Town, stood up and went, Auckland Council now has a policy of creating congestion. Well, this was at a meeting of chartered accountants and associated industry people who all went, what is he talking about? And he just blazingly said, we are unashamedly going to build cycleways across Auckland, creating bus lanes, and you will be forced to use public transport. Well, I smelt a rat, and that's why we set up Occupy Garnet Road.
I see. And of course, I've found in places where there are cycleways, and I support cycling, no problem there, but when they put cycleways past small businesses, it destroys them, doesn't it? I mean, normally about once every 6 weeks I'd pop into Harvest Whole Food and Mamata Bakery, and now I can't get a park, so I don't go.
Well, that's exactly the point, and that's what Auckland Transport and their associated organisations. Remember, Auckland Transport is no longer a public institution. It has been co-opted by private conglomerates. That is, there is no longer any elected members on their board. Mike Lee and Christine Fletcher were thrown off, so that even though they're called council-controlled organisations, in truth, all of our Auckland Council CCOs have now been infiltrated by the private sector and are nothing more than a mechanism to transfer public assets or cash into the private hands. And that's why all of us at Occupy Garnet Road were so outraged, because we watched them come into Westland to destroy all of the parking and shopping opportunities, pretending that they were actually improving the town centre, when no town planners and no checks and balances from Auckland Council Planning were involved whatsoever. They simply pulled a plan out of the bottom of a drawer with a felt-tip drawing, handed it to Dempsey Wood, the contractors, who then rolled in and at a snail's pace slowly began to destroy, disrupt and disturb the entire community in order to put a cycleway in that is barely used.
Well, certainly the one that I go past all the time is in Portage Road in New Lynn, and I don't think I've ever seen a cyclist on it, ever.
Well, this is the problem. You see, there is an ideology within the Greens, and specifically Julianne Genter, whose partner is actually the chief financial advisor for M.R. Cagney, which is a huge multinational who's established itself as the key organisation to plan, that's like town planning, and roll out these infrastructures. Now, like a viper's nest, you need a company to come in and say you need a cycleway, then you need a company to put up its hand and say, I'll build it. Then you have to get cooperation from the council. So if you tear it all apart, you'll see there's a very insidious plan to actually drive small business and the ordinary residents out of Auckland by overpricing it, by destroying local shopping areas, and you do this by reducing the parking, all under this great green excuse. Now, I might have believed Auckland Transport and the Greens were concerned about going for a clean green New Zealand, except the first act of Auckland Council and Auckland Transport was to cut down every mature tree in Surrey Crescent. How green is that?
It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's been really good. You and Penny Bright and another lot of people have all stood up against this, and so far you've stopped it?
Well, you know, what we did was we proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt that Auckland Transport and Auckland Council were engaged in fake and flawed consultation, because they already had a plan and all they wanted was lip service to go, we put our brochures in your letterbox, and then they would run fake surveys. It was, and they're just about to start again, and we'll engage again with them, pointing out the fake and flawed consultation, and we will stop them coming down our road, because we know beyond a shadow of a doubt this is not about cycleways or making the planet better. This is about transferring $625 million of public money into the private sector. and I'm not going to stop until that money is redirected into our sewage system, stopping raw effluents going out into our beautiful harbours.
Yes, well, I'm really tough on that one, living beside the Manukau, and having seen how it's deteriorated, and I can't take my dog down for a swim after there's been heavy rain. I can only take her down when there have been a couple of fine days, which is utterly miserable. And then there's all these cycleways. And just going back to the Greens and Julianne Genter, it's a bit like the 1080 issue, where the ends seem to justify the means.
Well, this is what's so shocking when you have what I call state capture with an ideology. I'm the child of hippies. I understand clean green, and I would support the Greens if I believed that they were actually conscious of the total holistic nature of our society. But when people like Julianne Genter are allowed to just run amok, or in my opinion blackmail the Labour Party by suggesting they would remove their supply and demand, I'm outraged, and I think they need to be called on it. If we've got a society in transition, which I believe we do, you can't suddenly remove parking and suggest that everyone's going to ride bikes. That's insane. I mean, perhaps you might start by not allowing so many cars to be imported into this country. Maybe you might start by suggesting that, there is an alternative. Maybe electric might be the way, but when there's precious earth metals involved in the battery system, well, hey, there's a conflict of interest there. So we need to engage collectively, not have this huge division. I mean, this cycleway has created the most disturbing fault line through our community. And once we were united, we shared a neighbourhood. And now we battle. People slash our tents and signs, and I know who they are. They know who they are, and the police know who they are.
Yes, it's really bad because, of course, the Greens should be standing up for community. And I feel very concerned, really, about the whole philosophy behind this. It's everywhere. And these council-controlled organisations, there's a lot of them, Watercare and a whole lot of them, where we have what we think is something that's public, but it isn't. And there's people making massive profits. So a council-controlled organisation has to, so they say, have 50% councillors on the board or the trust or whatever it is, or 50% or more councillors. But then when they remove the councillors, like they removed Mike Lee and Christine Fletcher from Auckland Transport, then they're putting in the councillors that'll fall over and say yes, 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 or maybe have financial interests even.
Well, let's be honest here. Our public local government was stolen when they invented the super city. And let's be very clear. Aucklanders were meant to have been given the right to a referendum on whether they wanted the super city. I mean, it was a business-driven concept that Rodney Hyde assisted, but he never foresaw how endemic and complicated it would become, whereas none of us have found it more efficient. We don't have our rates going down. We don't have better facilities. In fact, we're being priced out of our own city. I mean, let's just take the fuel tax. Why are we paying 25 cents more 12 cents per litre more in order to fund Auckland Transport, who are doing nothing but trying to disrupt and destroy the very existing infrastructure. Now, let's remember, they've been providing busways. Well, that's very nice of them. But buses are privately owned companies that receive an enormous multi-million-dollar subsidy. So when you pay your $3.50 or $4.50 or $5.50, whatever it is, to travel on a bus, that money is going directly into the hands of 10 private bus companies, 4 private ferry companies, and a train company that's managed by a multinational company from France who's changed its name now to Transdev.
Yes, it was Veolia.
Correct.
And Veolia sued the Egyptian government for raising the minimum wage. Now, they actually have lost, but after 6 years of the Egyptian government having to pay heaps of money in order to fight that. So there you have the investor-states disputes that so many of us have been standing up against, and that our government has rolled over and not solved the problem. So the more we get into these sorts of situations, the worse it gets.
Well, what we've really got is the emergence of the one world order. And this all goes back to Agenda 21. And people look at me and they go, oh, Agenda 21, well, there's nothing to be afraid of. Well, actually, Agenda 21 is when the multinational conglomerates internationally infiltrated the United Nations as the ultimate backdoor way into accessing the assets and cash reserves of local and central governments. And, the public has to wake up and realise that, capitalism isn't the sweet thing where you go to my cafe and have a cup of coffee. Capitalism is about maximising profit over people. And that's what New Zealand has become. I came here in 1963, and one of the things we were escaping in America was this out-of-control capitalism built on the industrial military machine. Well, all I can say is, now in the 2000s, New Zealand is holding an arms sales conference in Palmerston North. We're the country that stood up and said no to nuclear warships in our harbour. It's time we woke up and started to exercise our voice and to stop this nonsense of undemocratic rule in our own local government.
Absolutely. We made a big fuss in Auckland last year when the conference was here. So they moved it. Wellington, they made a big fuss in Wellington, so they moved it to Auckland. They got an even bigger fuss. So now they've thought, we'll go to Palmerston North. We'll make it difficult for the protesters, instead of listening to what the public want. And we don't want an arms expo here. It's ridiculous.
Well, it is. And, I do need to say, I point the finger at central government. I'm very disturbed to see the way that the Labour government is falling into the arms of big business, as if somehow they have the answer. The answer resides in serving the people and understanding the fundamental needs. And it certainly doesn't come by selling off our main waterfront assets to the Chinese. Let's be honest, the Chinese have made it very clear that they have the BRI plan in place, which is about the trade routes and building infrastructure. Just look at the waterfront. There's 4 or 5 skyscrapers in excess of 250 million going up. That's what the unitary plan was about. It wasn't about helping you and I. It was about serving the giant property investors who want to come here and maximise their profit and obviously provide a exodus for their own citizens. But the bottom line here is we've just started to allow, through the unitary plan, the unashamed second land grab, and we will be those exiled from our own city.
Well, not only that, it's what disturbs me is the whole CCO system, because the council-controlled organisations, the people that work for them don't earn anywhere enough, because the way that this works is that companies are going to bid, I suppose, for the job to do, and the Auckland Council takes the lowest bidder, and then how do these companies then manage to fund themselves? They pay their staff lousy wages.
Well, that's true, and this is part of the global procurement process, and this is what's so shocking about the privatisation of our public assets.
Yes.
Because what's happened is that the council, in brackets, tenders. Well, these things are all hidden. Now, if the council fulfilled its obligations under the law, and that's the Public Records Act of 2005, you'd read in Section 17, number 2, every public office must maintain in an accessible form so as to be able to be used for subsequent reference. You see, we don't even have our local government following the law. They just make it up. And this, of course, is what Penny Bright and I was saying for the last, 15, 16, 17 years. The council is not following the law. They make us follow the law. If you don't pay your rates, boy, they come down on you like a ton of bricks. If you don't pay your licence for this, that or the other thing. But the truth is, Auckland Council executives under Stephen Town and Phil Goff are doing nothing but exploiting the public and failing to observe their own, the laws of the land that says that they must maintain proper records. This is how the multinational companies are just laughing all the way to the bank. And I just have to say here that Auckland Council is on the verge of bankruptcy. They won't admit it, but they are selling off land, reserves. They're trying to redevelop golf courses and parks in order to make them more attractive to sell. And I have never been more concerned about the finances of this city as I am now. And if you talk to them, you'll realise they've been involved in playing the derivatives market, which is completely unacceptable. It's like playing the share market with the public money.
Very dangerous.
And that's why Penny's always demanded that the Public Records Act was observed so that we could keep them accountable.
When Penny was dying, I did a petition to the government asking or demanding that they actually ask Auckland Council or insist that Auckland Council adheres to that Public Records Act, because at the moment they're not doing so. They're not telling us the details of those CCOs. They're not giving us the details. You can't find out anything about them if you go on to Auckland Council's website, or if you go on to Auckland Transport's or Watercare's or whoever. If you go on their website, you can't find the details of the contractors, the costs of the contractors, all of the things that, seeing it's ratepayers' money is involved, we should actually know about.
Well, that's why I recommend everyone comes to grips with the Information Act, the Official Information Act, and that's simple. All you do is write a letter, address it to the mayor, it'll get to him or his people, and say at the very top of it, an Official Information Act request, and ask 3 or 4 simple questions like, how much did the Waitemata cycleway cost, or how much will it cost? Who's involved? Just as a way to make them realise that they must be accountable. But I so agree with you, it's so important that the Parliament steps in, because, you know, we're all being milked like a cash cow, and we have no accountability from either our council or from the private companies who are feeding off them. I mean, this is where I should mention, you know, the Committee for Auckland, that Auckland Council is a member of the business committee who's basically lobbies them for contracts, for tenders, everything from building through to footpaths. I mean, you know, our city is seen like a mine, something to mine. 10 years ago, they mined all of the red chip off all the footpaths, that beautiful red chip that came from Waiheke Island, and they sold it to China for sandpaper. So we, the public, pay to have our footpaths repaired. The contractor scraped it all off, melted off all the tar, sent it off to China. Beautiful sandpaper. So they were double dipping. They do the same thing with the bluestones. You might have noticed that, well, you might not notice, because under the bluestones there used to be 2. When they dug them up, they put one aside. They took the 2 from underneath that you couldn't see, that actually made the gutter, put them in their truck, sent them off to China, ground up and made into infrastructure pipes. And the thing about these infrastructure pipes is they don't conduct electricity, so they stay very cool, which is why the Chinese love our bluestone, already neatly packaged into these nice squares. Now, you try getting Auckland Council to admit that that's going on. Well, they will tell you every fib. Luckily, we have videotape going back 15 years showing this process, the product taken offshore, all of this. But, you know, it's exhausting to try and keep your own council accountable while they have a philosophy of stealing from the public. Now, until there is a major change within our democracy where people who sit in those roles, their goal is to serve the public, then we're screwed.
I'm gobsmacked here.
Are you? Why?
I didn't know that.
Well, did you know that they've been spraying glyphosate for the last 20 years in a cocktail that they renamed BioSafe? And every time you challenge them about it, they come up with a new concoction. Now, the truth is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, and we have this evidential proof of it, that they continue to buy and spray glyphosate on every single street curb, in every single public park, and in most of their private stadium areas. Well, not private, and this is shocking in light of Monsanto being found to be guilty of glyphosate being a key factor in creating cancer. I mean, that's why New Zealand has the highest cancer rate in the world, not only from melanomas, but because of this consistent use of glyphosate, which, by the way, it doesn't stay on the ground. It evaporates into the air, and if you're like me, you suck it in, and I have a major allergy to it. So for 2 days or 3 days, I just curl up in a ball because it affects me in such a way. And I'm sure there are thousands of Aucklanders who have these days in the month where they go, I feel terrible, I don't know, I can't think straight, what am I going to do? Well, next time that happens, ring the council and say, when did you last spray my street? And even better than that, get yourself on the no spray register. And you do this simply by ringing council on 3010 I'm going to repeat that, 3010 and say to the reception person, put me on the no spray register. And if we all did that, we would stop them spraying in Auckland City.
Now, that's very interesting because I was in Cornwall Park last Tuesday and they were spraying, and I get a very buzzy top lip when I'm around chemicals. And then the next 3 days I had a really sick stomach. Now, I've just put the two things together. I've been very aware of the glyphosate issue. Waterways throughout the world are full of glyphosate. Yep. It's just incredible. And, of course, aquatic life cannot live with glyphosate. It is actually known to kill aquatic life.
Well,
so what the hell are we doing still allowing this? And before we were a super city, we had areas that were sprayed with steam.
Correct.
And yes, it doesn't go down to the roots, and yes, you have to do it again, but they come round and do the glyphosate again anyway, because, okay, they've killed that weed, but another one's come up.
Well, this is the irony, they're weeds. You cannot kill them. And the thing about the spraying was, I was in the council meeting where they gave themselves $50,000 to run a trial, and then I was in the council meeting 3 months later when they went, it wasn't cost effective, it had too big a carbon footprint. I mean, it was just the biggest load of lies you've ever heard. But here's the thing. On the glyphosate spray sheet, info sheet, it goes, no matter what you do, don't allow this to get into the marine waterways or any riverways. So what do? They spray the curbs, and every 150 metres there is a grill that leads straight into our harbours. We don't have any separation whatsoever. And we have photographs of them spraying before the rain, during the rain, after the rain. I have never seen more stupidity in my life. And, I just can't understand as a population, why do we tolerate this in New Zealand? Why do we allow, our lords and masters to threaten the health of ourselves, our children, our pets? I mean, you ever had a dog that's got an itch that the vet can't figure it out? Well, guess what? The vets know that itch is directly related to the dogs walking through the vaporized glyphosate. But hey, what are you going to do?
You don't know when it's been sprayed, because I remember I'd arranged for my son to come over and weed my road frontage. And had I not seen them putting the spray on when they were earlier in the day, my son would have come over and would have been weeding with his hands and would have been touching the darn stuff. But I would like to say to the listeners, glyphosate is the key ingredient in Roundup. And we have got Roundup widely advertised on television at the moment. I can't believe it. I can't believe that we're allowing this to happen, because Roundup is even more toxic than glyphosate.
Well, that's right, and often, they'll use Roundup in the biosafe mix. I mean, I've put in an official information request and to the manufacturers of glyphosate, and they'll tell you everything that's in it except the active ingredient, because that's commercially sensitive. And this is where we're at. We are still allowing ourselves to to have these chemicals on the shelves. And I mean, I would ask every single garden centre and retailer of Roundup and Glyphosate to get it off your shelves. I mean, if you've never had anyone die in your life of cancer, if you've never had anyone who's been affected by a respiratory complaint, well then maybe you wouldn't understand, but we've all been touched by it.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, we need to somehow, as people, keep writing letters, keep signing petitions, keep really doing something, not just sitting back and giving up, because there is a kind of feeling like, oh, what's the point? You know, but we've got to get past that, what's the point? And now, going back to Auckland Transport, there's a lot of issues there around the whole privatisation issue. And do you know there's 6 bus companies are actually for sale?
Really?
Yes, of our Auckland bus companies. 6 of them. I saw it in the newspaper this week. So it's obviously not working for them. So what's going to happen? We're going to get some more people come in with contracts. And how are they going to get in there?
Well, I'd like to ask the question, how we come to have suddenly a fleet of diesel double-decker buses when New Zealand was the foremost manufacturer of electric buses. I mean, and I remember having a meeting with Mike Lee going, here's the company in New Zealand who's designed and manufacturing the best electric buses. They're being sold all over the world. Why don't we have them? And, you know, it was interesting because when I spoke to the woman who was the head of that section at the time, a Scottish woman, she basically told me to go jump in the lake. At which point I started to realise that there are wheels within wheels, and that the driving force of this particular form of modern capitalism is to hell with everyone. Profit over people. And when it comes to the bus companies, you know, the fact that they're spitting out the particulates of diesel. I mean, just go to Greyland shops where they're trying to turn it into kind of like a mini depot without doing it. And I have a friend who's an artist who went, I can't even think straight. I've got idling diesel double-decker buses, 3 deep, lined up outside my studio. I mean, this is the sort of effect it's having on our local community. But do they talk to us? No. And these subsidies, I mean, they are eye-watering to see how much money is being dragged out of the public sector into the private sector. And I think, you know, it's true to say that Auckland Transport has a history of corruption. I mean, it was only just 2 years ago where they finally, you know, were able to get a court case in place where the corruption was proved up in Rodney. But, you know, 40 people were interviewed about that. You know, there are whistleblowers throughout the organisations who just are in fear, because if you stand up to the corporation, well, you'll lose your job, you'll lose an opportunity to work again, and you'll certainly lose your mortgage. And that's why it's so important that the government brings out the new legislation around whistleblowers to make it safe for people to tell the truth within the organisations that they're working in.
I think that's very important. I'm Lisa Eyre, and I'm interviewing Lisa Prager on Green Planet FM, and we're talking about privatisation, Auckland Council, and a lot of other things as well. I was just looking here at 28 billion is going to be going into building the new infrastructure. 18.5 billion is coming from government. 9.5 billion is coming from council, and then there'll be all the private contracts. This is how it works, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. You take the biggest load of gold you can find, and then you distribute it amongst your mates. I mean, you know, I find these numbers eye-watering. They couldn't even spend their budgets last year, and yet they're coming back for a second one. And let's look at the infrastructure. The people who are actually being served by the spend of this public money are foreign investors who are building the skyscrapers that are full of people. You know, this isn't about taking care of our rickety old sewage. This is a drive to to intensify, as is outlined in the entire plan for Agenda 21, which is get your public, intensify so that you can reduce everyone's living space to between 50 and 90 square metres so that you control them. Control what they eat, where they go, where they play. You know, that is the capitalist model. That's how you do it. Now, you know, I'm a capitalist. You know, I believe if I make something, I should sell it. There'll be a profit so I can make another 2 of them. But I just cannot understand how we allow the major corporations to infiltrate our public sector and control exactly where we go. You know, this is, it's seen in West Lynn, where basically by taking out the parking, you destroy the small shopping areas. The landlords can't afford to rent them to anyone because there's no money to be made. So they sell cheap. Who picks it up? The international foreign investing multinationals, who then knock down the heritage building because, let's face it, you know, you can't make enough money, go up 4 to 40 stories and then go, oh, we need some shops, restore the parking and go on as usual. I mean, this is being driven by the likes of Westfield, who actually, they've got unlimited parking, you know, but they certainly feel the pressure from us small businesses because that margin is being taken off them from the internet. So it's a vicious circle. And I think it's time we all woke up to what's really going on and had a debate about, you know, how much of our heritage do we want to preserve? How much intensification? You know, affordable housing isn't possible because the National Party sold off the in majority of the state houses and thereby destroyed that link in the chain of having affordable housings. I mean, just kiss it goodbye, people in Auckland, because the land is being so priced out of reality that they can't put 1 or 2 bedroomed houses or terraced houses. They've got to go 440 stories. That's the only way to make it work.
Yes, it's very distressing, the whole situation. And I think we need a new word. I think capitalism, as you and I are, because my business was obviously a capitalist business, isn't what's happening now. What's happening now is corporatisation.
Exactly.
So I don't think we're in a capitalist society. I think we're in a society of corporatisation.
Well, that's, of course, why there was such big protests around the TPPA, because people recognised that was almost the final brick in the wall of these large multinational corporations getting control. And the fact that our government has just given into that. I mean, you know, my attitude is I'm an eternal optimist. That doesn't matter how bad it is or what laws they create. We can change them. But we have to be united and we have to be courageous. And I so agree with you. Writing letters, signing petitions, going to marches, having meetings. You know, Occupy Garnet Road was a tiny little movement where about 10 of us sat around a table on a traffic island for, 18 hours a day. What we couldn't believe was the response. People from all over Auckland would stop to come and visit us, to chat for half an hour, to discuss what was going on. They recognised it was happening in their neighbourhood. They started groups in their area. Like, we are eternally capable of mobilising against these forces. First of all, you've got to have faith that it's possible. Then you've got to be incredibly kind of imaginative. I mean, fancy occupying a traffic island. And we didn't do that premeditated. I simply put out 150 flyers in my local neighbourhood and said, join me at 10 o'clock on the traffic island for a chat. And boom, suddenly there was a table, an umbrella, a tent. People brought drinks, people brought flyers and flags. We started making signs. And of course, remember, the corflute sign, the piece of corflute plastic and a big fat black felt tip or blue felt tip from your local warehouse stationery is all you need to begin a protest. And at this point I want to put a shout out for the removal of tree protection. I am so disgusted at Phil Goff's hypocrisy where he goes, I want to plant 1 million trees, and yet he's cutting down thousands and thousands, or allowing thousands of trees to be cut down. All the council has to do is go, native trees, you're not allowed to cut them down. And at least, have a debate about it, not just get out the chainsaw and off you go.
as soon as that law changed, in Titirangi, there were chainsaws going. It was just incredible. People were kind of waiting for that to happen. And it's unbelievable.
It's like Kauri dieback. You know, I grew up in the Waitakere Ranges, and I know for a fact that they never used to spray glyphosate. I have a theory that glyphosate is part and parcel of weakening the system.
So do I.
Well, there you go. So what happens is, you know, this chemical vaporizes, it floats around, it falls onto the ground around the trees. Antibiotic means you kill the good biotics in the soil, and therefore suddenly trees that have lasted thousands of years are dying on our watch. I'm meaning, you know, and the council suppressed the report from the key expert on that because they didn't want anyone to know, and still don't want anyone to know, what's really going on in the bush. You know, I just think we need a full clean out of our council system, and of course that can happen next year in October when we vote for our councillors and our local body, local board people. I mean, I just want to see them all out, and preferably a fresh new lot whose philosophy is about serving the public, not being served by the public.
I think we've got a few councillors that I would say are actually serving the public. I would say that Kathy Casey, Wayne Walker, Mike Lee all do their best in that department, but we've got a lot that are serving the corporates, quite definitely, and we must get them out.
I've got to keep my lips tightly sealed at that point. You know, what I have to say about councillors who I've been involved in for many years is that it's a case-by-case issue. You know, Kathy has been very supportive of Penny and I on many different occasions, but when it comes to the cycleway, she's been blinded by the light.
Oh, I see.
You know, Mike Lee's recently woken up to what's been really going on, and is suddenly, Greg Sayers, yes, fighting hard. He's completely, hated by the council institution because he's prepared to stand up to them and go, enough's enough. I mean, at the end of the day, like you say, it's about the money. Follow the money, and you will find the culprits. And that's why we so desperately want the Public Records Act to be enacted, because then this information would be made public. So,
the petition that I did, which was actually the wording of Penny Bright's wording, and the petition, I've got it into the government now. Their committee is called Governance and Administration. And they looked at it for 10 minutes last week. I haven't heard what's going to happen now. I'm waiting with bated breath. But I'm really hoping that there will be some integrity there. Because I don't think it's just Auckland Council. I think it's councils all over New Zealand.
Well, that's true. I mean, and this was the problem with the super city. Once Auckland goes down a track, they have these... they're not even legal entities, but they're sort of like the mayoral forum, where they all get together and they go, listen, Joe sorted it out this way, we should follow suit. And that's why when Penny went to Wellington and stopped the super city being created down there, she did them a huge service.
She did.
And I have to, pay absolute credit to her, because she had the courage of her conviction, and she had the information at her fingertips to go down there and to show beyond a shadow of a doubt that the super city does not serve the people, it serves the corporate structure.
Now, we've spoken a few times about Penny Bright, but for those listening who don't know who Penny Bright is, Penny died 2-3 weeks ago. She's been Auckland's top activist, I would say, for years. Would you like to just say a couple of things about Penny? Because she really deserves so much acclaim.
Well, it's true. I met Penny at a council meeting. I was there concerned about the glyphosate all those years ago, and she was there with the water pressure group. And the thing about Penny is that she was incredibly well researched. And so when Penny said something, it wasn't just like a fly off the wall. She had done her research, she knew the facts, and she was prepared to bring them. And time again, the councillors and the council officers tried to vilify her as just some kind of off-the-wall nut. Well, the truth is, Penny was and will always be remembered as the key public watchdog whose anti-corruption philosophies and ideologies will be the basis by which we will change the society and how our public institutions work.
And at her funeral, I think her partner was called out for people to stand up and continue her work. And very much hoping that people will.
Well, the thing about Penny was she wasn't just a one-track person. She helped people who were trying to stop, the removal of community housing and public housing. She worked tirelessly to bring water under the public umbrella so that it wasn't exploited. She exposed Panuku and the property division of the CCOs and the corruption that's endemic there. I mean, wherever there was an issue, Penny would respond.
And she was on the committee organising the TPP marches, which is where I met her. And Penny and I and another lady, Laurie Ross, we organised a peace march when we had the warships in town. She's been there, and everything that she believed in, she's done something about.
It's interesting because Penny refused to pay her rates, and it wasn't that she couldn't, it was that she was trying to reflect back to society that if they were prepared to take our money and not tell us where it was going, who was going to keep them accountable? And her entire battle was an attempt to get them to open the books. And I think the cry is still, open the books, because then it won't all be done in the back room and under table with kickbacks sliding back and forth. It's a bit like the stadium. My reasons against the stadium is, this is what you do. It's an old trick. What you do is you find the most expensive piece of land, you plan the biggest project you can, you convince the council that it's a great idea, you start work, and then halfway through you declare bankruptcy. You have just found the way to launder the biggest amount of money through the biggest hole. And that's why that stadium's never going to happen. It doesn't matter how great the design is that essentially it's nothing more than facilitating that kind of laundering.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen, because if it does, you were saying that you thought probably it would affect Eden Park, because they'd say, well, give us Eden Park and then we can put housing on there.
Well, of course, what they'll do is they'll attempt to do a trade which says, we'll replace Eden Park with this arena downtown, but in return we want all the land. They'll intensify the land right there in the middle of valuable Mount Eden, and then they'll half build the stadium, declare bankruptcy, and we'll walk away. I mean, I'm so sick of the pattern. Are we the only people out there who can see it going on? And if we're not, then all you have to do is join together with your friends, with your neighbours, write letters, start petitions, put up signs. You'd be astounded at how terrified the institutions are of just ordinary people raising their voices. I mean, the whole idea of putting it out there on Facebook, they're running scared. They're going to pretend they're not. But that's why they have 136 PR people at Auckland Council and Auckland Transport to try and cope with people like us.
Well, I think that the Auckland Transport's the one that we need to focus on at the moment, big time, because of the huge amounts of money involved.
Well, yes, and that's what I find so scary, like how much is a kilometre of roading? That's the whole thing. Nobody can tell you, because it's as big or as small as you want it to be. And that's why I see Auckland Transport as the very heart of the procurement corruption that's going on at the moment. And with nobody actually asking any questions, with no independent analysis or of the cost benefit of these projects, well, we might as well just open our bank accounts and go rob us blind. I think it's incredibly important that we look towards having a truly independent commission into our CCOs. And when I say independent, I mean people outside of New Zealand. Because let's be honest, we all know each other. We all have friends and relatives who have a barbecue with this Prime Minister or that Minister. I mean, there's 2 degrees of separation in New Zealand if we're lucky. And I'm saying it's time to call for a totally outside New Zealand, independent, ethical people who you can actually point a finger and go, those people have a history of being ethical and caring about public service.
And I mean, it isn't just buses and trains and ferries, and of course they're not public transport, they're actually private. But it's also the roads and footpaths and bridges and culverts and streetlights and road signs and bus stations and ferry terminals and car parks, which is my beef, because the car parks, Wilson car parks, for example, are from Singapore, and they are making an absolute mint out of us. And, yes, it'd be great if we could all cycle and not contribute to climate change by using our cars and all of those things. It would be absolutely fantastic. But we're not ready for that change yet. And one of the reasons we're not ready is I can never get a car park at the train. So, I want to catch the train, but I can't park my car. And I haven't got a bus service right to my door, so what do you do?
Well, this is the irony of the failure of Auckland Council to actually invest, and the government to invest for all these years. And it's the same thing, because they're not honest. They're not actually caring about the public. They're actually caring about the profit, and they're driven by people behind them who want more profit. So all of this is a big fat excuse. And I can tell you that because while I was occupying a bulldozer on Surrey Crescent, trying to stop them stealing the bluestones, that's after they built the island into the middle of the road, I was there all day, and the boys were going about their work. That was fine. Suddenly, the Auckland Transport boss turned up. And I couldn't believe my eyes. Suddenly, the workers were all going at double time. I thought maybe I had sunstroke. But the truth was that it's all to do with making money. If you want to charge a lot of money, you've got to have a bunch of people standing around for a considerable amount of time to justify that. And when you're paying $20 an hour, and you're getting millions of dollars for the contract, then you can afford for those people to stand around for day after day after day, meanwhile disrupting local business. And that's what was so clearly played out in West Lynn, and again in Mount Albert, and now up in Birkenhead, that it's a route. It's all designed to pretend to be assisting business, but nothing like disruption and destruction will assist business, because people can't cope with the dust, with the noise, and with the removal of car parks. And let's be clear here, I'm not anti-cycleway. I've ridden my bike all my life around Ponsonby, and the truth is I never needed a cycleway to go down the quiet back streets and across through the little reserve and then over through the park. So all this nonsense about creating commuter cycleways is insane unless you have another agenda. And that's why I believe the Greens have actually been hijacked. What big business has done is gone, hey, we're going to bring you cycleways, we're going to make it clean and green, and we're going to deliver, it's going to cost millions, but who cares, it's going to be good for the planet. And the truth is, the sweet old naive Greens have bought in and provided the perfect excuse for the corporate invasion. I just want to fall about laughing, because essentially I want to see a planet that's clean and green. But you don't start that by supporting the biggest infrastructure multinational corporations in the world.
Exactly. And yes, naivety, I think, is the problem.
Well, I think that Julianne Genter isn't naive. I think she's ideologically predisposed to the Agenda 21. Her support of Bike New Zealand is borders on obsession. I think the same thing goes for Pippa Coombe. Without Pippa Coombe driving the local Waitemata Community Board, we would not have the removal of parking outside all the Westland shops, the attempt to destroy my business and the business in every other little area. I mean, these people don't think about business. They don't know how it works, and frankly, they don't care. They simply want to remain in power and play with powdery ideas that sound ideologically okay until you get down to the nitty-gritty.
Well, I certainly think there's an issue with Julianne Genter's partner being what was it? Tell me again.
M.R. Cagney. You should all look. There was a guy on Radio New Zealand, M.R. Cagney. He was representing it, going, I'm an urban change agent. I'm here to make it all great, and we don't need cycleways. We can just put up cones, and then once the cones have been really successful, we'll put in concrete ones, and then on and on and on, until you realise that they were part of the problem, because they're driving this agenda, and the PR spin. I mean, fake news has got nothing on the way town planning, and people like Ludo Campbell-Reid, who is inside Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, the champion, I love this word, the champion of Auckland design, Ludo Campbell-Reid. Well, really, that guy is at the very core. Until he arrived in this country, they had none of these ideas of, close this off, turn this down, shut that off we go. I wouldn't mind if I thought he actually had any skill or knowledge in this area. But the guy, again, just like Julian Genter, is an excuse to spend the money. And if it's all about spending the money, find yourself a champion and woohoo, off you go.
Well, to my mind, okay, cycleways, good idea if people are going to use them, but not on main roads where there are businesses. They have to go through the suburbs, quite definitely.
Well, go through side streets.
Yes, that's what I mean.
And what about education? What would happen if we spent $10 million on an education campaign about we're all going to share the road, like they do in Amsterdam? We've got to learn to be careful to realise that guy on that bike is someone's dad, someone's brother, someone's son. If we had spent the money on education rather than Auckland Transport going, hi, I'm here on a bike. Hi, I'm here on a scooter. Hi, this is the future. If the money was spent on helping the public to make that conscious awareness, then maybe you wouldn't open your car door into the cyclist coming down the street. That's why this whole scenario of cycleways is just a con, because nothing has put in the front end to actually showing how as a society or getting buy-in or assisting us. Auckland Transport's giving the licence to Onzo bikes and now Lime scooters is tantamount to preferential treatment of a private industry for their own gain.
Well, absolutely, and these scooters at the moment are allowed on the pavement, and they can do 27 kilometres an hour, which is quite fast.
Oh, well, it's more than fast. I'm so worried. I have an elderly mum with a dog, and she can be quite erratic, or the dog can, but she can't hear a scooter coming up behind, and often scooters think they have a right to be on that footpath and that the pedestrians need to give way like they do on the road. Well, there's no education around that. They just suddenly 700 scooters arrived and no helmets. Who's picking up the bill for the injuries? Are we paying our ACC to cover? And it's an American company. Are the profits going offshore? This is where Catherine King, who's the head of Auckland Transport Cycleway and Walking Ways. I don't know why she's still employed. We were able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was her decisions that led to the Waitemata Cycleway and the mistakes that were made, but her and all of her executives are still in place. If I'd screwed up that much, if I had shopkeepers baying for my blood, well, I certainly wouldn't be in business. So why are these people still in those positions of power?
It's a real concern. And what I don't understand is why council, government are not saying we need to promote New Zealand business. But look, Lisa, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming in. I so admire your passion, and I know that you're not going to give up. And I hope that many people who've listened to this interview join in doing something about the things that they are really concerned about.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
If you want to get active, this Saturday, November the 3rd, there is a march against 1080. Meet at Quay Street at 11 a.m, that's at the bottom of Queen Street, and march to Aotea Square at 11:45. There'll be speeches, there'll be face painting and things like that at Aotea Square, and probably speeches at the beginning of the march as well. So that's this Saturday, November the 3rd, at 11 a.m. You've just been listening to Green Planet on Planet FM. Join us at the same time next week, 8 a.m. Thursdays, or anytime online at greenplanetfm.com.
I invite you to be able to come to greenplanetfm.com, where we have over 400 interviews in our database, which you can readily download and listen to be able to inspire yourself to become the change you want to see in the world. and become involved in caring for your children and grandchildren's future. We are also on Facebook, on Green Planet FM and ourplanet.org. Please come and love us. This is Tim Lynch.
And or Lisa Eyre.
And Liz Gunn.
In the spirit of Aroha, wishing you a wonderful week. We look forward to being with you next week. I say, kia kaha and haere rā.